them all what I'm made up. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
Okay, so we're jumping straight into a really high-profile legal battle today. It's grabbing headlines everywhere.
Yeah, the one involving NFL legend Shannon Sharpe.
Exactly. He's facing this huge $50 million civil lawsuit, allegations of sexual assault. It's a lot.
It really is, and things are moving fast. So for this deep dive, we've pulled together what's publicly out there.
Mostly news reports covering court filings, right?
Yeah.
And those text messages that got released.
Exactly. Those texts are a big piece of it. And just to be clear, our goal here isn't to take sides or decide anything.
No, absolutely not. We're just trying to unpack the claims, the core claims of the lawsuit, and look at the evidence both sides are presenting, based purely on what's been reported.
Right. Just laying out the information as we have it.
So let's start with the allegations themselves. What's in the lawsuit?
Okay. So it's a civil suit filed in Nevada State Court. The woman filing it was initially identified just as Jane Doe.
And the core claim is sexual assault.
Yes. The suit alleges it happened somewhere around the end of 2024, maybe bleeding into the very start of 2025. That sort of time frame.
Okay. And the lawsuit itself, it gives some context about their relationship before this alleged incident, doesn't it?
It does. It describes it as a rocky, consensual relationship. That's the phrasing used, lasting about 2 years.
Rocky consensual. The word consensual seems pretty significant, especially given what Sharpe's team is now arguing.
It definitely stands out. But then the legal papers go on to make these very specific allegations that seem to contradict that, at least around the time of the alleged assault.
Like what specifically?
Well, the claims include things like threats to kill, manipulation, control, and repeated threats of physical violence.
Physical violence.
Yeah, the filing specifically mentioned choking and slapping. So these are really serious claims laid out in the legal documents. It paints a very different picture than just rocky consensual.
Okay, so that's the accuser's side of the story, as laid out in the lawsuit. Now let's switch over to Shannon Sharpe's defense.
Right. So his attorney, who is Lanny J. Davis.
Well known.
Very well known. He issued what they're calling a categorical denial, just flat out denying the allegations.
And a really big part of their initial response, maybe the biggest part so far, was releasing those text messages.
A huge part. They released 44 pages of alleged text messages between Sharpe and the accuser.
44 pages.
Man.
Yeah. And what's the argument they're making by releasing these? What's the strategy?
Well, the core argument from Sharpe's team, from Davis, is that these texts clearly indicate the nature of their relationship was consensual and sexual in nature. That's, a direct quote floating around.
Consensual and sexual, and they also claim she initiated a lot of it.
Yes, that's a key point they're making. That in many cases, it was initiated by her with specific and graphic requests. They're essentially saying, look at this history, look at these messages. This points towards ongoing consent and her active participation, even initiation.
And they haven't just said that. They've pointed to some really specific, very explicit examples from these alleged texts.
Oh, definitely. The reports are full of them. For instance, there's one alleged text from the accuser talking about wanting a dog collar around my neck.
Right, and wanting to be tied up and do bad things. That quote is everywhere.
Exactly. And they seem to be highlighting messages that span a significant period. Like they point to an alleged exchange from back in March 2023.
What happened then?
According to the reports citing the released texts, the accuser sent a photo of a woman tied up.
Okay.
And the text allegedly said, tie me up like this and FK me. And Sharpe apparently replied to that.
Wow. So they're using that early exchange to establish this kind of dynamic from way back.
That seems to be the idea, establishing a pattern. And it apparently didn't stop there. There's mention of a follow-up text about handcuffs, too.
Suggesting it wasn't just a one-off topic.
Right. And then fast forward a bit to January 31st, 2024, there's another alleged text cited.
What did that one say?
This one reportedly reads, that just got my pee-way wet. Tie me up and do bad things to me.
And Sharpe A's alleged reply
Was supposedly just cuff up.
So again, very graphic, very specific BDSM-related language.
Exactly. And Sharpe's defense team is basically saying, look, this shows she wasn't just participating, she was actively initiating these kinds of explicit activities. They've also mentioned other alleged texts where she supposedly wanted hardcore BDSM action or said she felt kind of freaky.
It gets even more direct, though, right? I saw reports about texts like, I want to be abused daddy.
Yeah, that was allegedly from March 14th. And another one from October 9th, reportedly about wanting him to put a dog collar around my neck and choke me with it while you're fucking me.
I mean, it's incredibly explicit stuff to have out in public. It certainly paints a picture of a very specific kind of sexual interaction they allegedly had.
No question. And the timing of some of these other texts they released is also something Sharpe's team is emphasizing.
How so?
Well, they highlighted an alleged exchange right around New Year's Day, January 1st, 2025.
Okay, which is very close to the period the lawsuit alleges the assault happened.
Precisely. In that exchange, she apparently wished him a happy new year. They're suggesting, normal, friendly contact right around that critical time.
But wasn't there also a weird text from that same day? Something about money?
Yes. Also, on January 1st, 2025, there's an alleged message where Sharpe supposedly told her that if she sent him $50,000, she could come over.
$50,000. Okay, that definitely adds a transactional layer to the conversation right around that time.
It does. And then the very next day, January 2nd, 2025, Sharpe's lawyer pointed specifically to another alleged text from the accuser.
What was that one?
This one apparently referenced her big, juicy ass and then asked for $25K for each cheek.
Wow. Okay, so the defense is using that to argue what? That because they were talking like this, even about money for sex acts, right after the alleged assault period began, it couldn't have been assault.
That seems to be the implication they want people to draw, that consensual, even transactional sexual communication was ongoing right up to and potentially past the date mentioned in the lawsuit.
This is getting really complicated. And there was more too, right? Something about wanting to have a baby.
Yes, that's another whole dimension of the alleged texts they released. The accuser reportedly used phrases like baby gravy.
Baby gravy.
Okay.
Yeah. And apparently texted about looking pregnant with her big black baby. I mean, incredibly personal stuff.
And Sharpe's replies to this are also in the released messages.
Some alleged replies, yes. There's mention of his birthday in 2024 and her apparently saying she took out her IUD. It's just, actual discussions about pregnancy were happening.
And didn't Sharpe allegedly call her desire for a baby a pink?
That's reported too. Allegedly on February 29th, 2024, he wrote something like that. And she allegedly replied, suggesting he had a breeding kink.
This is quite the exchange.
It is. And she also allegedly added that she only wanted a baby if it was his, that she thought she'd be a good mom. And then this phrase, I've always wanted a black baby.
So just layer upon layer of really intense, personal, and racially charged communication being put out there. Exactly. So Sharpe's legal team is presenting all this volume of explicit texts, the BDSM themes, the baby talk, the timing, to build this picture of a long-standing, consensual, highly sexualized relationship. That's their narrative.
Okay. Crystal clear what their argument is based on these texts. But what about the accuser's side? How have they responded to this release?
Well, her lawyer, Tony Busby, came out swinging. He had a very strong counterargument.
What did he say?
His main point, and he was very emphatic about it, was this. Every text that Mr. Sharpe's counsel released today, purportedly from Jane Doe, are dated prior to the alleged brutal assault set forth in Jane Doe's case.
Oh, okay. So he's drawing a hard line on the timeline. He's saying all this stuff happened before the alleged assault.
Precisely. He's arguing that releasing these earlier texts, no matter how explicit they are, is irrelevant to the specific claim of assault that happened later.
And he accused Sharpe's team of trying to distract people.
Yes. He called it an attempt to distract the public's attention from the allegations of assault. And he basically said, it's a tactic and it won't work.
So a fundamental disagreement about whether these prior communications matter at all to the current claim.
Exactly. It boils down to timing and relevance. Sharpe's team says the history matters. Busby says only the events around the alleged assault matter, and these texts predate that.
Got it. Now, just for a bit more context on the relationship itself, how did they reportedly meet?
According to the civil complaint, the lawsuit documents, they met back in 2023. It was apparently at a gym in Los Angeles.
Okay. And there was an age difference mentioned too, right?
Yes. The lawsuit states the woman was 20 years old when they met. Sharpe is significantly older. So that age dynamic is part of the background presented in the complaint.
And the lawsuit mentioned another specific incident from before the alleged assault. Something about Instagram Live.
Yeah. The complaint alleges an incident in September 2024 where Sharpe was apparently overheard having sex while on Instagram Live.
Seriously? Okay. That detail's in the complaint itself. It certainly suggests something about boundaries, maybe, or lack thereof.
It's definitely an unusual detail included in the legal filing. And then fast forwarding closer to the time of the alleged assault, There was some tension reported, right, based on text?
Yeah, there's a reported text exchange from December 26th, 2024. So just days before the alleged time frame.
What was that about?
Apparently, the accuser was demanding a formal apology from Sharpe for something. The reports say she kept pushing for it.
And Sharpe's response?
His alleged response at one point was something like, "I've already apologized. Stop playing childish games."
Okay. So that suggests maybe things weren't entirely smooth sailing between them right before the period in question. There was some conflict or disagreement happening.
Definitely sounds like it.
So when you put all the pieces together that are public right now, you really have these two starkly different stories emerging, don't you?
Absolutely. On one hand, Sharpe's team using these volumes of texts to say, look, this was consensual, this was explicit, this was their dynamic for a long time.
Painting that picture of an ongoing, mutually agreed upon sexual relationship, highlighting the accuser's alleged initiation of explicit content.
Right. But then you have the accuser's legal team saying, hold on, none of that matters. All those texts are before the alleged assault.
Yeah, arguing it's all irrelevant history, a deliberate distraction from the specific claim of non-consensual violence that happened later. They're really zeroing in on that timeline argument.
It really makes you think about how evidence like private text messages gets interpreted when it becomes public in a legal fight like this.
It does. And the motivations behind why certain pieces are released and when, it's all part of the legal maneuvering. It highlights just how complicated it is trying to understand what really happened based only on these selective releases.
So for you listening, this initial deep dive really just scratches the surface. We've laid out the initial claims, the counterclaims, the evidence presented so far from public sources.
And it shows pretty clearly, I think, how tough it can be to get a full picture in these kinds of sensitive legal situations, especially when information comes out piece by piece, often framed by one side or the other.
The timing issue raised by the accuser's lawyer seems particularly crucial here, whether those prior texts actually tell us anything definitive about the specific events alleged in late 2024, early 2025.
Exactly. It's the core point of contention right now regarding those messages.
Which brings us to a final thought, really. Something for you to maybe mull over.
Yeah. Given how complex these situations are, with these conflicting narratives, private details made public, strategic leaks, how do we, just as individuals trying to follow the story, process all this?
How do you interpret information about sensitive legal cases like this when it plays out in the public square, often before all the facts are truly known or tested in court?
It's a real challenge, isn't it? Something to keep in mind as this and other similar stories continue to unfold. A reminder to be critical, consider the source, and maybe reserve judgment.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have the ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Barbie doll.